can't double the money supply and not expect some really big events in inflation. But back again to Woodrow Wilson. He was not an individual who respected civil liberties. And the conservative Republicans at the time fought him. On the Espionage and Sedition Act, the Republicans didn't like it. He arrested thousands of people because they showed dissent against the war. Yes, how do you want it? You want it that way? Yes, you may have a position on the war, others may have another position. But we all ought to be together that you have a right of dissent and you should never be put in prison for dissenting. Famous person was arrested back then. I wouldn't have agreed with his political beliefs, but he was a famous person, but he did speak out against the war, which he had a right to do, and that was Eugene Debs. And he was put in prison because he spoke out, and Woodrow Wilson didn't like him, and because the Congress passed these laws, which the Republicans objected to. But he was put in prison indefinitely, and I guess because of Woodrow Wilson's illness and all, toward the end, he never got a pardon. Do you know who gave him the pardon? Warren G. Harding, a Republican. There is nothing wrong with describing conservatism as protecting the Constitution, protecting all things that limit government. Government is the enemy of liberty. Government should be very restrained. And as I have said so many times, it's time that we do study and understand from a conservative viewpoint on how much we should be engaged around the world. And we have good backing from good Republicans of the past. But now, that is the past. I don't live in the past because I see freedom as a very progressive modern movement. But in the past, since Woodrow Wilson's time, we as conservatives, too many, have taken on this saying that we are responsible, but that is a neoconservative viewpoint and not true conservatism. Who do you think it was that tried to keep us out of wars? The Republicans did. One of the greatest Republicans, and he's called Mr. Republican. There's a statue over in Washington, and that is Robert Taft. He worked hard to keep us out of war. He also thought that it was a violation of our rights to have a military draft. He strongly opposed the draft. He was strongly opposed to NATO and didn't like the United Nations, and here we have, casually accepted all this. But who was it that coined the word, the military-industrial complex, and beware of it? It was Eisenhower that told us about that. So there's every reason for us to think seriously about, what we really believe in and what conservatism actually really means. In 1956, I was in college, but I thought a draft was coming because the French and the British, got into a fight over the Suez Canal with the Egyptians. The Egyptians wanted running the canal. So I was worried because I thought I'd be drafted. I wasn't drafted for 10 years after that, but I thought I'd be drafted because they came to Eisenhower and they said, "Come help us, take care of us. They're taking this canal." And Eisenhower said, "I'll have no part of it." But back 100 years ago, especially around Woodrow Wilson, what happened in this country is we took freedom and we chopped it into pieces. We don't think of freedom as something unified. There is only one kind of freedom, and that's individual liberty. Our lives come from our Creator, and our liberty comes from our Creator. It has nothing to do with government granting it. If you want small government to protect liberty, that is well and good, and that's what the founders believed. And that is actually what the Constitution was written for. But if we have some group over here defending, oh, economic liberty is good, that's right, we do. Except a Republican president said, we're all Keynesians now, and we've been living with the Keynesian philosophy and economics. They're still all over the Hill. And how many people on the Hill are saying, and the Fed? But personal liberty, if our liberties come to us as individuals, they are not collective. They do not. Freedom does not come in groups. You don't have freedom because you're a hyphenated American. You have freedom because you're an individual, and that should be protected. But I do not believe freedom can survive, and I do not believe we as conservatives can contribute much if we still think freedom only comes in pieces, that you can protect economic liberty but not personal liberty. Sure, I imagine everybody in this crowd would say, yes, protect our right of free speech, protect our right to our religious values. But as soon as it comes to putting something in your mouth or in your lungs, you say, you don't have enough sense to decide what you should do, so we are going to use the heavy hand of government to come down and protect you against yourself. But we have gone a long way from the dictates of the Constitution. The Constitution, of course, says that only under declaration of war can we go to war. But we're in perpetual war now in every country in the world. It's going to last a long time until we go bankrupt. That is what I believe is happening. But we have done a few other things that aren't conservative, as far as I'm concerned, endorsed by both political parties. And one is that we have now endorsed the principle of preventive war. Another term for preventive war is aggressive war, starting wars because someday somebody might do something to us. That is not part of the American tradition. Just last week, there was a hearing on the Hill. The subject of assassinations came up. And the administration was there, and they explained that, yes, they indeed do endorse the idea of assassination. And then they were asked, would you endorse the idea that we have the obligation to assassinate American citizens? And the answer is yes, they do. They claim that they have the right to assassinate American citizens. Now, what are the conditions? Somebody in the administration, we don't know exactly who, makes the determination that that individual is a threat. And if he's a threat, then he can be assassinated. Now you say, well, he's probably a bad guy, and he probably is, the people they pick. They only have 3. But the principle is important. Someday there might be 6 or 8 or 10. What if that would have been the fact that Eugene Debs might have not been put in prison? He might have been assassinated because he was a threat. So this is not just casual talk. This is not radical left-wing liberalism protecting civil liberties. This is protecting the whole integrity of our country and our Constitution and the rights of the individual. We now have, as a country, have accepted the principle that habeas corpus is only worthwhile in a limited fashion. Some people don't deserve it. If they're designed as a threat, they can be held for unlimited time in detentions. It can be secret detention and still susceptible to torture. That is not what we're all about. We're much better than that. And we as conservatives have to realize that we have to bring this back together again. Good conservatives can believe that personal liberty is of the utmost value. We all probably more easily agree the free market is a good way to go, and yet we still have a lot of people who have to reject the notion of regulations and benefits and bailout for Wall Street and the Federal Reserve System and paper money. All these things have to be worked in.